So it turns out I was wrong about short films, like really wrong.
Wrong, sir. Wrong.
Had I known what I know about them now, I would have done things very differently with my filmmaking career. Not that I didn't have my reasons for underappreciating them, but that all changed when I made 2 short horror films that have now become the most watched
films I've ever made.
What? Because of their success, an explosion of new opportunities has presented itself to me, and it seems as though my filmmaking career is at a turning point. How this all happened is something worth sharing, because just 3 years ago, I thought short films would be a step backwards and ultimately a waste of time. But yeah, it turns out I was the one who had this completely backwards, so what changed? Well, we got a journey all the way back to 2016 after I had just released my first feature film, Social Norm. If you haven't seen my other video where I chronicle making that film, why not? I'd highly recommend checking that out. But after the film was released, let's just say Hollywood didn't come calling. You see, most aspiring filmmakers dream that one day they'll make an indie feature, get into some big film festival, be offered a theatrical release or lucrative streaming deal, and then some doors will open. It seemed to me as though a producer or production company out there looking to develop a new film could appreciate the hard work and sacrifices of making a feature by yourself. But the harsh reality is that nobody cares that you've made a little indie feature. At least one that wasn't a major hit.
I don't care.
What they care about is whether or not your next film is going to make them money. It's as simple as that. So I immediately went to work on new feature-length scripts. I spent time writing out some fun, big concept ideas that would appeal to a wide audience, and the goal was to get an executive producer, a production company, or studio to finance one of these projects. It seemed as though it was just a matter of taking meetings, networking, and getting in front of the right people.
I got an idea for a movie.
Doesn't everybody?
Well, as you could have guessed, nothing was getting off the ground. For the next 3 years, I pitched my scripts to several companies and industry people looking for content, and despite some interest from a few respective parties, they all passed me up. Rejection is par for the course, sure, but what started to worry me was how much time was starting to slip away. By 2019, it had been 3 years since I had released Social Norm, and 5 years since I had actually made the movie. I was starting to feel as though I had to make a choice in a no-win scenario. Either finance the next film myself, or just don't make another movie. Well, after the financial nightmare that was Social Norm, ain't no way I was gonna pay to finance another movie myself. On top of that, I married my wife in 2019, who I love more than life itself, and we were very focused on building a financial future for our new family, so a high-risk investment in an indie feature was a hard no from me. At the same time, though, the creative itch to make another film was starting to get too intense not to scratch. This, of course, led me to the idea of, why not just make a short film instead? A short film had crossed my mind many times before, but I always thought, what was the point? I mean, short films are good practice and all, but ultimately, the chances of them opening doors is far less than that of a feature film. Up to that point, the vast majority of my filmmaking experience consisted of short films, but none of them ever generated many views or garnered much recognition. Part of this is because the short film market is very crowded. In the digital age of cinema and free content sharing platforms like YouTube, making your short film stand out amongst other shorts is just as hard, if not harder, than it is with a feature. Plus, who is gonna pay to watch a short film? If the main thing I'm trying to fix this time around is making sure my next film is lucrative, to think a short film has a better chance than a feature seems silly. Another reason to avoid short films is that they are a considerably harder format at conveying a compelling story. Condensing a narrative to be told in under 30 minutes seems to be a much more difficult format because you have little to no time for character development or creating emotional investment.
It's time to stop.
To top it all off, the most compelling argument to avoid short films was if I had the money to invest in a short, why not just put that towards a feature? If a feature is what you ultimately want to make, why are you spending time and investing money in something else? There just seemed to be no good reason I could think of. And that is when it hit me. The only way to justify a short film, it seemed, was if it served as a proof of concept for a feature. This actually sounded like a fantastic idea because it would check off all the boxes. It would allow me to finally create another film at a minimal cost, and it would also serve as a further development towards a feature. If nobody thought my feature scripts were worth the investment, then the only way to prove it was to show them a sample. Plus, the proof was something I needed to see for myself. I mean, if I can't tell a story that captures your attention in 30 minutes or less,
Boring.
then I have no business thinking that an additional 60 minutes would do the trick. Of course, this begged the question, what's the short about? I had feature scripts ready, of course, but then I realized none of them could be turned into a short, at least not easily. How could I convey such high concepts on film with a shoestring budget? If the whole point was to lend credibility, then it seemed I couldn't use the scripts I had available. And sure, I could have just done a scene, but it still didn't solve the budget problem, and having a self-contained story could be more useful if we wanted to submit to festivals and garner more widespread appeal. It was apparent that I had to work backwards, figure out the short film first, then expand the story into a new feature script after the fact. I brainstormed all sorts of cool ideas for a brand new story, but one of them kept standing out: the idea of visiting other people's nightmares. This idea had been sort of explored in films like Nightmare on Elm Street, Insidious, The Cell, and Inception, but the idea of having the ability to visit the darkest part of other people's subconscious and to do it willingly was very fascinating to me. Why would someone choose to visit a nightmare? What would they be looking for? So many fascinating concepts to explore, but I at least knew I had settled on the genre: horror. Now, I could spend all day talking about my approach to filmmaking and how we made the short film. Boring! But that's a subject for another video. I can tell you that it was actually a fairly stressful shoot given our limitations, not to mention that we shot in the summer of 2020 when the pandemic was in full swing, but everybody we worked with was amazing and very, very talented. The film was called Somnophobia, and once it was finished, I had this suspicious feeling that it was actually my best work to date, which felt oddly uncomfortable. On a personal note, the film was actually finished just weeks before the birth of my son, who I love more than life itself, so I decided to submit the film to a few major film festivals and just wait to hear if there was any acceptance. And sure enough, it didn't get accepted anywhere.
You bunch of losers!
As disappointing as that was, I started to feel even less confident when I also submitted it to be reviewed by a few indie film critics. They panned it.
What kind of a show are you guys putting on here today?
The film received terrible reviews from all of them, with even some of them taking cheap shots at some of the other creative people behind the film, which really rubbed me the wrong way.
Now the main problem area is up here.
Anyway, it was looking like this thing was gonna be a dud based on the initial reaction I was getting from the industry professionals. So I told my co-producer that we should just put it up on YouTube. At first, I submitted it to popular horror channels that host other indie short films, but they all turned me down as well.
Okay. All right.
So I had no choice but to release the film on my barely existent YouTube channel. So we premiered the film on March 30th, 2021, and that's when everything changed. The film suddenly found an unprecedented number of views within just a few weeks. The comments coming in were overwhelmingly positive, and I had dozens of people asking me if they could do a reaction video to the film, which I really enjoyed, by the way.
I have to make sure I didn't on myself.
My channel's subscriber count started climbing to levels I had never had before, and various film festivals reached out to me and offered a slot in their lineups for free. Sure enough, I was being contacted by all sorts of people in the industry wanting to discuss film projects. This was all great, but something was off. I had the feature-length script for Somnophobia ready to go, but it felt as if I was right back where I was before I made the short. Yes, I had a little more credibility now, and there were people who were interested in developing the feature, and still are today, but doubt was starting to creep in. I kept thinking that maybe I just finally got lucky. There was nothing special underneath the surface here. It was just pure luck that led to the film's success and nothing more. I mean, after all, film festivals, critics, and even popular horror channels looking for short films all turned me down. I mean, maybe the YouTube algorithm just did me a favor and started promoting my movie more than it should. All the while, nobody had reached out to me at this point and was saying, let's turn this into a movie together. They were saying, you should turn this into a movie.
Good luck.
Yeah, thank you. That doesn't really help me at all. So although it seemed like everything was changing, there was only one way to shake this feeling of self-doubt. Make another short horror film right away. It made sense to keep this momentum going, so I immediately went to work with the team from Somnophobia again to put together a new short film. With only half the budget this time around, I decided to make something simpler while focusing on how to improve the production process within the budget constraints. So in October 2021, we got together and shot Don't Hide, which was considerably less stressful to make and arguably the most fun I've had on set making a film. I decided I wasn't even gonna bother with the film festivals, critics, or other horror YouTube channels this time around, so we released the film on February 22nd, 2022, and it was a hit.
Wow!
Sure enough, the views kept climbing, and although it didn't quite blow up like Somnophobia did, it became proof that this was no fluke. I could make films that people wanted to watch and were actually watching. These 2 shorts generated way more buzz and opportunity than my feature Social Norm ever had, not to mention they are even starting to make me some money. So what does this all mean? First things first, I was wrong about short films. Not just because I had success with them, but ironically because I also wasn't looking at the bigger picture. I was so convinced that feature films were the only way to expand my film career that I didn't realize I was actually hurting my career thinking this way. So although feature films will probably always be my endgame, I now realize I was dismissing other opportunities that could help me get there. But the biggest mistake I made was that I was asking for permission to go make my movie. Not having money for a movie is every filmmaker's conundrum, but another harsh reality is that if you wait for somebody else to give you that money, chances are you'll never make your film.
Not a great plan.
I'm not suggesting it's impossible to find outside investors, nor should you start being financially irresponsible with your projects, but making a film is actually really accessible these days if you can be resourceful. What I've decided to focus on going forward is building up my brand. My short films have opened the door to an audience who enjoys my work, and the more I expand my brand, the more doors will keep opening. And look, branding yourself doesn't mean you gotta be a YouTuber or some sort of influencer, because I know I certainly don't want to be labeled as that. But the point is that there's nothing wrong in dabbling in smaller projects that can showcase or market your brand of filmmaking. If anything, I'm now just as excited to keep making short films as I would be a feature because of all of you. It was because of you that I'm no longer stuck waiting around for some Hollywood big shots to give me the green light. You showed up and told me you liked what I was doing, and it changed everything. So thank you.
Thank you.
To be clear, I'm not pretending that my short films have been some sort of viral phenomenon or anything like that. The response has been impressive, but not that impressive compared to other shorts on YouTube. I still have a ways to go and it won't be perfect, but the game plan is clear. Create videos, make more shorts, develop feature-length projects, and build up my brand. One final thing is that in July of this year, my wife and I welcomed our daughter to the world, who I love more than life itself. So with my fiscal responsibilities growing, I know I can't keep funding my own short films forever without some sort of ROI. To move into bigger projects, I will need to eventually partner with others down the road who find my work valuable. But when the time comes, I know I won't be the one asking for permission. Thanks for watching, and if you want to stay updated on all the latest projects I'm working on, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Till next time, y'all.